Live from the world headquarters of RT America in our nation's capital, this is the news with Rick Sanchez.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rick Sanchez, and I want to welcome our viewers from all over the world, especially those of you who are watching us on the portable TV app. So, every once in a while, we get a shot of reality about the dangers of living in the United States in a report like this one that I'm about to show you. You're going to see it here on the screen. It says, essentially, the most deadly weekend in Chicago. This is a front page story in the Chicago Sun-Times, but it's been picked up by periodicals around the country and news networks as well. 104 people shot, 19 of them are dead, killed, says right there. This is an attention grabber for sure, but what happens when you give a story like this, which does sound alarming, right? But let's give it context. Let's give it context. Let's do that. Let's start with the murder rate in America, which, by the way, is not a pretty picture. The murder rate. There is no country in the world that even comes close. Here are the top 10 most dangerous cities in the United States of America. You're going to see on this list places like St. Louis, Missouri, with 69 per 100,000 people. That's the way they measure the murder rate, per 100,000. That way you can't just say, well, of course they have a high population, they're going to have a higher murder rate. No, this is done by 100,000. It's followed by Baltimore, Maryland, 51, New Orleans, 41. Then comes, Detroit at, 39, 40, Cleveland, Las Vegas, Kansas City, Memphis, Newark, and finally, number 10, Chicago. Chicago rounds out the top 10, as you can see right there, with 24 is the murder rate for Chicago. Now, let's look at the most dangerous cities in the world. And you're going to notice right away that they're all in one part of the world. Not this part of the world, but this part of the world. Murder rates in the Americas, mostly, by the way, Mexico and Brazil. And let me point out for you, using the same calculation, what the highest murder rates are. Places like, for example, Los Cabos, Mexico, and Caracas, Venezuela, number 1 and 2. Actually, they're tied. They both have, 111, as well as Caracas, 111. There's a ton of cities in both Mexico and Brazil, but let's move to Natal, Brazil. And then not too far after that comes St. Louis, Missouri, right, with 66. San Salvador in El Salvador with 59. Then comes Baltimore, Maryland, 56. San Juan, Puerto Rico, who knew, right? By the way, part of the United States. And then New Orleans with 40. This is the most dangerous cities in the world. If you notice something, that cities in Europe don't even play into the most dangerous. So we wondered then, well, what's the murder rate in Europe? And here's what we found. That compared to North, South, and Central America, it's really almost insignificant. Look at these numbers. The highest is Kaunas, Lithuania, with 5.4. Moscow has a rate of only 4.2. Remember, St. Louis, 69 or something like that? Glasgow comes in at, 5.1, and Marseille comes in at 3.5. So minuscule, right, compared to the United States and the Americas. So there you go. Context, perspective, that seems to reveal that when it comes to murder, along with Latin America, it's not about one story, one day, one headline about Chicago. The U.S. as a nation is kind of at the top of the heap. Now, why isn't that a bigger story? And what, if anything, is actually being done about that? These are the questions that we're asking today here on The News with Rick Sanchez, where we believe, and it's time to do news again. All right, so these are the questions we think are going to come to mind as you watch this newscast unfold. Why is gun violence so prevalent in America? Why does it seem that nobody cares? Also, Ecuador shuts the door on Julian Assange. Why? And what's it mean? Unemployment up, masks going back on. What's the tie in that story? All right, so the story is that in America, crime is up. But let me ask this question. When has crime not been up in America? Often Chicago gets the worst rap, but as you just saw, they actually come in 10th when it comes to the murder rate, which is more of a percentage than just a total number. And maybe it's because they do have more population than the rest of those cities, but not by average. And then there's this. Given that we're the most dangerous country in the world when it comes to crime and murder, when you combine all of those cities, why do we spend all of our treasure, our time, and our resources going around the world trying to fix other countries when compared to some of those countries, we are the ones who look like we need fixing? Think about that. Joining us now to break all this down is former prosecutor Arthur Rizer, who is an activist for improving our criminal justice system, as well as my colleague, Ben Swann, who hosts Boom Bust. This is a very important discussion that maybe we should have more of in this country, but for some reason it seems to be ignored by both the media and our politicians. So let me begin with you, Mr. Rizer. As you look at some of those numbers that I just shared, why don't we talk more about those? They seem startling.
Yeah, I would think it boils down to three major points. The first one is we have a Second Amendment. We can have a debate about what the Second Amendment actually means, but there is some inherent protection as it relates to guns in this country. And because of that, it's not newsworthy for what a lot of people. I think the sadder fact is that, the murder rate is going up. But if you are not a member of a gang, if you're not in the drug trade, and if you're not in a violent relationship, the chances of you being murdered are almost none in America. So it really is concentrated in groups of people that historically we haven't cared that much about. And Chicago is a great example. Chicago has certain pockets that have incredible murder rates, but everywhere else in Chicago is relatively safe. And so because we're talking about poor people, very often communities of color, we just don't care. And that is kind of a historical theme throughout the United States. And you see that in other countries too. And I still think it is important to note that on a 20-year view, violent crime is still at a historic low in this country. We have seen a blip in the last year. A lot of that is specifically because of domestic violence, because of COVID. When you group people together, they tend to kill each other, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's low compared to what, though? I mean, compared to the rest of the world, it's still very, 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 very high, and that's the problem. Now, Ben, let me bring you into
this. In those neighborhoods, absolutely.
Yeah, no, what do you make of this explanation, well delivered by Mr. Rizer, that essentially says, yeah, America's a dangerous place if you're poor and if you live in certain neighborhoods, but the rest of us, we're fine. What does that say about us, Ben?
Yeah, well, I think it says a couple of things. First of all, I think it's true that a lot of this crime is concentrated in specific areas. So, for instance, in Atlanta, where I'm not right now, but usually am, crime has been rising in the city of Atlanta for some time, and violent crime has been rising in that city in certain pockets and certain locations and among certain groups. But overall, when people look at Atlanta and they say, oh, it's becoming more violent, if you live there, you don't necessarily feel that. Most people don't necessarily feel that. So I do think it's more concentrated. But I think coming back to this kind of general concept of why are we seeing so much crime, I think there's a lot to it. There's socioeconomic issues that certainly play a role in it. The issue of gangs and drugs is still an issue, and it continues to be an issue and a big part of why we see the kind of crime that we see. But the other thing is, you asked a question about media, right? And how is the media looking at this particular issue? And I think one of the reasons that we have such a hard time getting good answers about it and about this issue as a whole is simply because when we talk about these issues, we're not honest about them. There's so much politics that plays into it and very little truth that comes out in these discussions.
I think you alluded to that, Mr. Rizer, a while ago when you mentioned, I know you happen to be a conservative because I read up about you, and yet most conservatives are afraid to talk about the gun issue because if they do, no one's going to vote for them. No one's going to like them, right? We're down to 40 seconds, by the way.
Well, oh, absolutely. We love to talk about what scares us and helping win elections, but guns have always been something that has derailed campaigns on the right. And I think that more conservatives need to be brave and talk about, hey, maybe we do have a Second Amendment, but can we do things that specifically help these communities that are being ravaged by gun violence? And the word drug has to be said over and over and over again. All those countries that you listed are countries that are wrapped up in the drug trade. If we could fix that, we would definitely have a a better chance of having success.
Do something about gun control and figure out the problem with drugs. Two great recommendations, two good guests. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. Great conversation. The country of Ecuador, speaking of countries with problems, has stripped Julian Assange of his citizenship, citing unpaid fees, problems with his naturalization papers. While that sounds somewhat ordinary, it's not. Remember, Ecuadorian citizenship is what kept Assange out of jail and out of the U.S.'s ability to extradite him. Why? Because he got diplomatic immunity while living in the Ecuadorian embassy. Here's correspondent John Huddy with a look at Assange's plight.
More bad news for WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. As he remains in prison in the United Kingdom, Assange was notified this week he's now been stripped of his Ecuadorian citizenship. Ecuador's foreign ministry said the ruling was made due to several factors, among them that Assange's naturalization letter had multiple inconsistencies, differing signatures, unpaid fees, and altered documents. Assange's lawyer, Carlos Poveda, said the decision was made without due process and that Assange was not allowed to even appear in the case. Poveda said he'll appeal the decision. Assange received Ecuadorian citizenship in 2018. And had been essentially holed up at Ecuador's London embassy for 7 years, protected by asylum status to avoid extradition to Sweden on rape and sexual assault allegations, charges that were eventually dropped. But Assange's time at the embassy came to an end in 2019 when he lost his political favor in Ecuador and his asylum status was revoked, driving him out of the embassy and into the hands of British police, who arrested Assange for skipping bail on another charge and on the U.S. extradition warrant. He has since been locked up at Belmarsh Prison in southeast London. In what was seen as one small victory for Assange, a British judge in January denied Washington's request to extradite Assange to the United States, saying the move would be quote-unquote oppressive due to Assange's declining mental and physical health. U.S. officials, meanwhile, say if extradited, Assange would not be held under maximum security conditions. A steady stream of his supporters, including his fiancée, continue to rally outside the steel fencing and razor wire of Belmarsh Prison, describing Assange as a hero who exposed U.S. wrongdoing in Afghanistan and Iraq and is a testament to free speech and press. His critics, including U.S. prosecutors, FBI, NSA, and CIA officials, however, describe Assange as reckless, an enemy of the state, and whose actions published leaked documents exposing the identities of overseas agents and thus risking their lives. So, as the calls to free Assange continue, he remains in the maximum security British prison, awaiting his fate, whatever fate that may be. For the news with Rick Sanchez, John Huddy.
We're finding out tonight there's a money angle to the COVID issues in America. And now this, are you ready? New mask mandates. What are they? And how are you going to be able to deal with them? How frustrating is this for people? We have two psychologists who are going to join us on a special panel we've put together to discuss this tonight. Stay tuned. We're coming right back. Hey, welcome back. I'm Rick Sanchez. So we're learning a couple of things today. Identity theft, unemployment fraud, always been around, but never like this. COVID-19 has helped scammers rake in millions. In fact, multi-millions have been taken in alone off the so-called Paycheck Protection Program. That's leaving a lot of people now dealing with debt and other issues, just as at the same time that they're all being told that, oh, guess what? Masks may soon become mandatory once again. This whole thing with COVID creates a frustrating scenario for a lot of people. And we're going to talk about that as well. But now here is NRS correspondent Faran Fronczak with the latest.
Rick, a man in New York received $1.5 million in just 10 months. Another man in California, more than $500,000 in just half a year. And a man in Texas, almost $25 million at the beginning of COVID. What do they all have in common? They all filed bogus claims for unemployment insurance benefits during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Bots filing applications by the hundreds, teams of fraudsters overseas making bogus claims, and online forums sharing advice on identity theft through the app Telegram to hundreds trying to get more than a COVID-19 stimulus payment. This discovered from an investigative report by ProPublica, where one identity theft executive believes the amount of losses for taxpayers to unemployment insurance fraud will top $400 billion. Texas has seen the most amount of cases, with hundreds of people getting calls from the Texas Workforce Commission saying they owe them money. And to make matters worse, as the COVID-19 unemployment benefits near its end, it looks like there's no end in sight for fraudulent cases. One Texas man just got 11 years behind bars for wire fraud and money laundering offenses in connection with his fraudulent scheme, getting $24.8 million in forgivable Paycheck Protection Program loans. The 55-year-old pleaded guilty and is ordered to pay back more than $17 million. Fraudsters have gotten creative and post all their tips and tricks on Telegram channels. One of them, How to File Claims in Maryland, whose Labor Department reported that it detected some 508,000 potentially fraudulent jobless claims between May and June of 2021 alone. In 2019, before COVID hit, the Federal Trade Commission saw just 13,000 complaints. In just 2020 alone, a year grappling with lockdowns and shutdowns from COVID-19, nearly 400,000 complaints went out from people saying their identities were stolen, up more than 2,900%.
Rick, the U.S. Labor Department's still trying to figure out how to fix the problem. Well, one approach under consideration, having the federal government create a centralized technology to help every single state manage unemployment claims rather than having them fend for themselves. When that will happen, folks on the inside say, not anytime soon. For the News with Rick Sanchez, I'm Faran Fronczak.
And this is a bigger problem. Thanks so much, Faran. So joining us now to discuss is a panel that we've assembled of professionals who work in the field of mental health. From New York City, we're joined by Chloe Carmichael, and also we are joined by Vijayeta Sinh. Both are clinical psychologists. And Vijayeta, I think I'd like to start with you. I'd like for you to give us a sense of the frustration out there, you know, obviously without harming any of the HIPAA rules that I know you have to abide by. Can you give us a sense of what your patients are saying to you? What frustrations you're actually witnessing when you have conversations with them about the rules, the regs, and now the possibility of having to wear masks again?
Yeah, Rick, I think it's been such a challenging couple of a year and some months, right, of going through this pandemic. And I think that the uncertainty is really what has made things worse for a lot of people that I speak with. I think we've gone through the whole range of emotions, right, from shock and denial and surprise to anger and resentment and hopelessness. So as we kind of move towards the end of the summer and into the fall, I think there was this rising hope that, you know, things were getting better. We were all kind of coming into the upswing. Everything was going to open up. Kids were going to be back in school. Colleges were going to be up and running. I think people were feeling a sense of hope. So I think it's unfortunate that we're back in this spot where we feel that maybe not, that things aren't completely over yet. And so I think there's still this fragility of uncertainty and what's going to happen next. And are we going to be able to resume life as we had hoped? How is it going to go? How are we going to adjust? Oh, how long is this Delta variant going to stick around? So that's very much still on people's minds.
Chloe, I'll be your patient. I'll tell you straight up, this is frustrating. This is hard. Sometimes it makes me a little crazy. Sometimes it makes me a little angry. What do I do about it? Coach me.
Yes, I just want to say I agree with what Vijayeta was saying, that there's not only, I think, a sense of uncertainty, but coupled with that, there's a sense of helplessness. And to your point about anger, one of the natural healthy reactions of anger is actually that we want to take action. And then yet the types of action that we might want to take can feel somehow inappropriate. And as a psychologist, I can tell you also that with masks, what goes on is that we interrupt what psychologists call our mirror neurons, which are kind of the underpinning of empathy, where when we see a face smile, we smile back. And I think this is especially angering and frustrating, to your point, for parents out there, because the effects of putting masks on children for long periods of time, perhaps even years, is really unknown. And the developmental consequences for children, I think, are very concerning to parents.
You really hit on something important. Facial features, a smile. that goes such a long way in human behavior. Take away the smile and we're what? We're robots, Vijayeta.
Very good word. I think it actually even gets into an element of depersonalization. There's something in psychology as well called the Stanford prison experiments, where psychologists actually put certain participants in uniforms and they were depersonalized. Some were the guards and some were the inmates. And by the fact of wearing the uniforms, it really increased the social tensions. And it almost seems like the masks are kind of doing the same thing in that they're depersonalizing us just at a time when we need our social support the most, coupled with that sense of helplessness and anger, as well as even just a mama bear concern about your kids and what that's doing to them. I think tensions are definitely running high.
Vijayeta, 30 seconds to you. You agree with what she just said, what Chloe just said?
Yes, I totally agree. I think that it's hard. We're social animals. We're meant to be with one another. We're meant to have human contact. And I think we've had quarantines and lockdowns and all of that has created so much stress, and especially for children as they're thinking about, well, as adults as well, as they're thinking about reentry and what that means and how we're going to have to suddenly cope with being back in the workforce and what that's going to look like.
You guys are great. What a wonderful conversation with two really smart people who deal with this in the real world. We're honored to have you. Thank you so much for your contribution. When it comes to the Summer Olympic Games, what do? Well, don't call it Russia. The team with the fourth highest medal count so far has been banned from representing that nation, but that hasn't stopped them, the athletes, from kicking butt. Here's Alex Mihailovich.
It's an event that is supposed to unite the world. Athletes from around the globe going for the gold, filling their friends, family, and nations with pride. However, for more than 300 competitors at the Tokyo Olympics, it is as if they are countryless, with forces beyond their control choosing politics over sportsmanship.
The issue of politicization in sports is regrettably still high on the agenda. The rights and interests of our athletes must be protected from any lawlessness, including decisions that some countries try to impose on the whole world, far beyond their national jurisdictions.
At the Tokyo Olympics, Russia's athletes are considered neutral. They still bear the country's colors of white, blue, and red, but technically their country is banned from the Games. So, they are viewed as representatives of the Russian Olympic Committee and not the nation. When they win a medal, as they have done many times already, instead of Russia's flag, the team's flag features its colors in an Olympic flame placed above the 5 Olympic rings. If an athlete from the team wins the gold, Tchaikovsky's Piano Concerto No. 1 is played instead of the Russian national anthem. The controversy all stems from a report from the World Anti-Doping Agency, or WADA, dating back to 2015. That year, an investigation by a former WADA president accused Russia of having a huge state-sponsored doping program, alleging systematic doping cover-ups in the country. Russia's Minister of Sport at the time denied the allegations.
I can say only one thing, that the Russian Federation and its government ratified the UNESCO Convention in 2006 concerning the fight against doping. Since 2009, for the last 5 years, we have done a great job fighting against doping, all under the control of WADA and the International Olympic Committee.
In 2016, WADA once again targeted Russia in the McLaren report, which contained recommendations to ban Russian athletes from the Olympic Games on the basis of what some say are unsubstantiated accusations of their involvement in a state-run doping program. Following the report, more than 100 Russian athletes were banned from the 2016 Rio Olympics. Many believe the agency unfairly targeted Russia, subjecting it to an unequal approach for conducting anti-doping tests when compared to other countries. In 2019, WADA banned Russia from all international sporting competitions, including the Olympics, for 4 years over doping non-compliance, saying that the Russian anti-doping agency failed to fully cooperate during investigations. Following an appeal last year, the Court of Arbitration for Sport cut Russia's ban in half to 2 years, meaning Russian athletes are not able to compete under their country's name, flag, and national anthem at the current Olympic Games. For WADA, that simply is not enough.
On the other hand, we as WADA, we remain disappointed that this CAS has decrease the level of the sanctions from 4 years to 2 years, and but of course, and that CAS allows compete Russian athletes with the colors of their flag in the uniforms, as we proposed. It was the neutral colors. It was in our recommendations.
The current ban means Russia can't be represented as a country at the 2022 World Cup or the 2022 Winter Olympics. Russia's flag and anthem won't be at the Olympics until the 2024 Games that are scheduled to take place in Paris, France. For RT, I'm Alex Mihailovich.
Wow, that's our news. Thanks so much for being with us. Got friends looking for a newscast? Not like the rest of them? Tell them we're here. And don't forget to tell them that they can catch us on Portable TV. I'm Rick Sanchez. We'll be looking for you again when it's time to do news again.